So let's get crimey. Today, I'm going to be covering the case of Kendrick Johnson. Have you ever heard of this case?
No.
Well, I think once we get into it, you'll have seen it in the news because it's awful. And this family has fought and this community has fought for this case to be reopened on multiple occasions. And really, I feel like the last few episodes we've been really talking about corruption in police departments. And this is just kind of like another cherry.
Example.
Yeah, this is like the cherry on top. So
great. Can't wait to get pissed off.
Yeah, you're going to be torn by the end of this. So on January 10th, 2013, 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson did not come home at his regular time after school during his junior year at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia. That day, he had actually planned to attend a basketball game, but as time went on, his mother, Jacqueline, was like, okay, even if he was at the basketball game, like, this isn't right. He would be home by now. So she called around and she found out that he wasn't even at the basketball game. So she gets up and she drives after calling him multiple times to the school, and the school is completely dark. All of the lights are off. The parking lot is completely dark and empty, and all of the doors are locked. So there was no sign of Kendrick, and she, at this point, it's midnight. So she just goes to the police department. It was the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department, and reports her son missing, which we all know already what police said. They were like, he's 17.
Ran away.
He'll be back later. He's probably just doing what regular 17-year-olds do. No.
Right.
They don't. Maybe in the 70s, but no, they don't do this. So Jacqueline was obviously wanting to hope for the best, that maybe he was just being a stupid 17-year-old, but mom instincts tell you that that's not what's going on. So she returns home, and she probably had one of the most restless sleeps of her life. And the next morning, she woke up and drove straight to the school because she knew one thing: even if he was being stupid, he was not going to miss school. But after speaking with the counselor, she literally finds out that he has been missing longer than she even thought. He was marked as absent. No, he was at school, but he was marked absent from his 3rd and 4th block classes, which was after his lunch break. Meaning that she never got a call that he wasn't there, which would not fly today, but I was in school at this same time.
Right. Well, my parents didn't get called.
You guys didn't get called. We would get, at the end of the day, my parents would get a call if, we were absent for half of the day and hadn't been checked out. Just to check on us. Probably because of situations like this.
I think if we hadn't been checked out through the office, it would probably raise some red flags.
Yeah, exactly. So she goes up and she's like, okay, he hasn't been here for 3rd and 4th period, and he wasn't at that game. So he's been missing for, a full 24 hours at this point. And she's in the school counselor's office, having this conversation, when a phone call comes through to the counselor, and an announcement's made that the school's on lockdown. And she's asking questions, what's going on, but they're not saying anything back to her. So she gets up, they're like, hey, you have to go. Well, the police are there. And a student comes up to her and says, they found Kendrick, and he's dead. So she starts running to this area called the old gym. So the school had 2 gyms. One was the newer gym, and the other one was the old gym. At my school, we had the volleyball gym, which was our old gym.
Right.
And then the dome was our new, but that one got torn down. So anyways. So basically they're like, it's Kendrick, he's dead. So she's trying to go. The police are not letting her in, and it's just a super weird situation. So let's talk about the old gym and how he was discovered. So a bunch of students were hanging out in the old gym between classes, and they notice a sock sticking out of a rolled up cheerleading or wrestling mat. And these mats are 6 feet tall, 3 foot wide, and they're standing vertically and stacked up in the corner of the gym.
Yeah.
Did you guys have those?
Yes.
Yeah, especially with cheer. Anybody that knows cheer knows what I'm talking about. So the students went to investigate what this sock was, and this is when they realized that it's a body. And after trying to they didn't know who it was, they just knew it was a person in there. They're like, hey man, what are you doing? Do you need help, or you need help getting out? But they realized that this person's unconscious. and they're getting no response. So they run to get help from a teacher or a faculty member, but once the teacher arrives and began moving the mats around, they smelled it. It was decomposition. So they all quickly stepped away after realizing this and did not touch another thing, and the police were called immediately. Once the police arrived, they identified the body to belong to Kendrick Johnson. And the only thing that Kendrick's family was told at the time is that their son had been found, but they weren't telling them that he was dead, but other students were. So they knew that this was not a good situation. It wasn't until many hours after this that they concluded that he was actually deceased. And they were denied access to even identify his body because they said students had already done it.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding. But the story that they were told about how he ended up in this mat just does not add up, like at all. The family and the public were told by the sheriff in a press conference that 17-year-old Kendrick was getting ready for a PE class, because that was what he had after his lunch period, when he goes to the mats in the gyms to get his sneakers. Now, I know this doesn't make sense when I'm just saying it like that, but basically at this school, in order to have a gym locker, you had to rent it. But a lot of students didn't want to do this, so they would just like leave their gym clothes and shoes behind these mats or like in the bleachers. Exactly. So Kendrick and his friend also did this, and he and his friend shared these pair of gym shoes. They were Adidas tennis shoes. And when they were done with them, they would put them back in the top of the hole of this mat vertically, or like when it's laying down, just like stick it in the side of it. And then the other one would go get it the next day when it was their gym period, because they rotated schedules. So the sheriff, Chris Prine, theorized that Kendrick had gone into these mats in the old gym to retrieve his shoes, but they were too far down in the mat for him to reach just from the top like normal. Therefore, he climbed on top of the bleachers before reaching down into the hole and trying to reach for the shoes, when he gets stuck and unable to get help or move, and eventually unable to breathe, concluding that he had died, according to his autopsy, from accidental positional asphyxiation.
Because he was upside down.
Yes. So really quickly, I just want to touch on what this is. There's only been, this only became a thing like in the 50s to be able to say that this is what you could die from. But like also, let's think about what else they said in the 50s. Like, right, you know, exactly. Whatever. And it's only been put on autopsy reports for about 30 different cases since then. And basically, it's when you literally can't tell what it was, but you do know that airways were obstructed. So that's where we get it from.
Okay.
It's very rare. And the issues that the family and the community have, and really the entire true crime community at this point, is that this doesn't add up because, number one, he was holding his headphones in his hands. So if you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to reach down in this,
you're not going to have anything in your hand.
You're not going to be holding your headphones doing this. And number two, at the time, they're saying that when this went on, there were multiple other students in this gym. Therefore, someone would have heard or seen something. And on top of this was a highly trafficked gym. So even if those people didn't see it, a lot of kids were getting their shit from this mat, in and out of this area a lot. And fourth,
because they have to fucking rent lockers.
Like, what? I've literally never even heard of that. So number 4, next, why would he go in from the top when he could easily, they're sitting at the bottom of the mat, like at the bottom of the hole.
Flip the mat over.
Just literally tilt it. I mean, he's a young, able, strong man that would be able to grab it and move it and get him. And number 5, this gym is like small, like so small, Morgan. Literally probably just like one court, and it's got these bleachers I'm telling you about are like 2 stacked benches, like you would see at like a soccer field.
Okay.
Like they're not, and this is not huge, and there were students all throughout it. Like it's not big enough for no one to hear or see anything. it took weeks, almost months, for the family to receive their son's records, autopsy reports, and photos, and even to see their son for the first time. And once they did, this theory presented to them in the public seemed damn near impossible. And no one was listening to them. No one was believing them, kind of like the Lauren Taylar Agee case. They had people telling them that they just were not accepting the truth, that they were on a witch hunt. And so the family did something, and it rocked this community. It rocked the nation. They released all of their son's photos from the case. And just a forewarning, as I continue on, I'm going to be discussing these photos, and they are hard to hear about and even harder to see. But I'm going to link them in our description so that you can view them at your own will. But they did this to prove that this was not an accidental death. So the first thing that we are going to discuss is how his body was found and the possessions around him were discovered. So on the top of the mat, looking down, you can see Kendrick's feet. He's wearing white socks, and it's pretty snug, and he's like deep into this mat. But beside him, in the hole, are his school shoes. And they aren't just sitting loosely on top as if he were like to have kicked them off while like struggling to get out or trying to get help upside down. They're literally perfectly snug tucked between his body and the mat, with the laces facing up towards the sky as if I were to pick up my shoes from the ground and place them somewhere else. Like, it's weird. And it's just like not how you would think if someone was struggling to get out of somewhere and like frantically kicking off their shoes. They would be either not in the mat or like flung everywhere else, right, and like gently sitting on top, where these are like tucked between the mat and his body. And let's talk about the shoes of the hour, the shoes that he was supposedly getting and the reason why he got put in this situation in the first place. Where are these? Well, one of the shoes was directly below where Kendrick's body was hanging upside down, as if he was reaching for it. And gore warning before I get into this. When a body hangs, all of the blood in that person's body settles with gravity. Therefore, all of Kendrick's blood was settling and draining from his head, leaving a pool of blood directly below him on the gym floor, where the shoe was. But this shoe was found completely clean, without a drop of blood on it, on top of the blood puddle.
What?
And they were like, well, he was probably holding it. Okay, well, how long can he hold on to it?
Right.
And if that's the case, blood was literally drained. There's blood on his arm. It was literally draining down his arm because it was in front of him. It still would have had blood on it. It's completely clean. But now let's talk about the mat itself. I already stated they're 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, rolled up. But the hole that his body was discovered in was 14 inches wide. And Kendrick's shoulders were 19 inches wide. However, if he was in the diving position, which it looked like he was semi, because he had one arm above his head and the other tucked beside his chest, he might have been able to squeeze into that, but it's very unlikely. We're not cats.
Right. And those mats, when they're rolled up tight.
Tight.
And then they're bandages.
Yes.
Not bandaged, but
like wrapped together.
Right.
So let's talk about Kendrick himself. On his face and arms, there is severe bruising and swelling, mainly from the blood settling and pooling because of the position of his body. But in addition to this, there are several scratches and tears in his skin. And some people tried to explain it away like, oh, well, he was probably fighting to get out and rub that rough mat. those mats are made. Yeah, you'll get burn on them. I've had plenty of it. They're not going to
tear you.
They're not going to rip your skin open. I've tumbled and literally knocked myself out on one of those before, and same. I barely had a scratch. So this looks like, to me, his family, and many others, that he had been attacked. So to further support this, on the gym wall near where the mats were, there was dried blood dripping down the wall, as well as in the girls' bathroom, a trash can filled with like bloody towels.
Oh,
Police tested this blood, and it was not a match to Kendrick's, but then the testing ended there. There was no further investigation into any of this additional blood, and because his case was ruled an accident, none of these samples were kept for further testing. They were just thrown away.
Are you shitting me?
I'm not shitting you. And y'all, that included the shoes. That was the entire basis for the source of this story.
Thrown away.
Thrown away. They're gone. So at this point, the family and the community are literally fighting and screaming for law enforcement to listen to them and reopen Kendrick's case. And luckily, their efforts did not go unnoticed. On October 31st of 2013, U.S. Attorney Michael J. Moore announced that his office would be reopening Kendrick's case and investigating these claims. And their first move was to exhume his body. Now, this is where shit gets really sketchy on a deeper level than just like an accidental death. Like, this shows corruption and systemic racism in a way that I have never seen it before. And okay, this is really,
I'm not even ready.
I know. When they exhumed his body and began examining it, all of his organs were missing.
What?
Every single one, including his brain. And he had been stuffed with newspapers. Now, this is a practice. However, it is extremely outdated. You can't get in trouble for doing it, but it's not supported. This is an old practice. And typically, if this happens, let's go back to the organs. In some cases, if the organs are not placed back into the body because they're needed for further testing, they are safely stored and maintained. Well, the GBI, which is who performed his first original autopsy, claimed that they had given all of his organs with his body to the funeral home, along with Kendrick's body and clothes. However, the funeral home no longer had any of these items. But luckily, the organs were not what the medical examiner needed to determine Kendrick's death was not accidental, because during this autopsy, the second autopsy, it was determined that his death was not accidental positional asphyxiation. In the second autopsy, it was officially determined that his actual cause of death was blunt force trauma to the right side of his neck. Around this same time, 290 hours worth of school surveillance videos were released to CNN from 35 different cameras throughout the school. And a forensic analyst for CNN found that 2 of the cameras are missing an hour and 5 minutes worth of footage, and another set of 2 cameras was missing 2 hours and 10 minutes worth of footage.
That day.
They later claimed that this was at the fault of an unsynced camera clock system and motion sensors that are all running from the same server. But mysteriously, the cameras facing the area where the mats were just so happened to be out of range and out of focus, so much so that it couldn't even be examined and used as evidence.
Yeah.
But that's not even the worst part. Before this footage was ever released to police or CNN or the public, the school was allowed to review it first and release what they thought was applicable to the case.
Oh, were they?
When in the world have you ever heard of that?
So the school has jurisdiction over
apparently
over the
and
police
basically
department, over an investigation.
And some other podcasts that I was listening to, and I'm not even going to name them because I know they probably didn't mean it this way, but to me they were kind of explaining this away, which this is nothing that can be explained away to me. They were saying it was because of the FERPA Act, which is that what it's called, FERPA Act? For students, like protecting minors' identities so that you can't just release it. But you can release that to the police.
Right.
It's the police we're talking about here. We're not talking about CNN. Yeah, maybe before CNN that needed to be reviewed to make sure, you know, that the minors in the photos like weren't being, you know, wouldn't be exposed.
Yeah, but you can still blur out
faces, which is what they did.
Yeah.
Which is what CNN did. But yeah, I've never heard of a shop owner. Let's talk about like a shop owner where like a crime happens. They are never able to go through and like edit it beforehand. Never heard of that in my entire life. So this, accompanied with all of the things that we have just talked about, furthered the belief that this was not just any case. This was now a cover-up. And the theory of this is terrifying, to say the least. So, let's get into this. Months before Kendrick's death, he and another student had gotten into a fight on a bus. And this just wasn't a one-time ordeal, because after this altercation, the original altercation, he and this other student, along with the student's brother and friend, continually harassed and attacked Kendrick at the school and other school events. And Kendrick's parents reached out to the school on multiple occasions reporting these incidents. And some, or better yet, most of these incidents took place in front of faculty and staff members at the school. Yet no actions were ever taken to stop this. But that is not the worst part. Because that particular student and his brother, their dad is an FBI agent.
Are you kidding me?
Yep, it's just a good old white boys club.
Oh my God.
Sitting down there in Valdosta, Georgia, and covering this case up. But despite this theory being pretty logical after tons and tons of back and forth, both of the boys were determined to be in different locations. One was around the school meeting with Coach Jimbo Fisher that was recruiting him to come play college football. And the other one was at a wrestling tournament and had already left for the day. I'm going to come back to that, whatever. So I'm coming back to that. Don't worry, guys. I'm sorry. I just have to leave you there to move on. So in 2016, Michael Moore, the U.S. attorney, dropped this case, saying that there was no further investigation, making it seem like there was no hope for Kendrick, for his family, to get the justice that they deserve. But then, Morgan, just as everything looked down, one of our favorite groups swooped in. Anonymous. And they released a video that exposed all of the shady shit that was being covered up and called out name by name these people. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this video, Morgan, and then we're going to come back on and discuss it with everybody.
Okay.
All right, guys, we're going to link that in the show description.
I am fucking sick to my stomach, and I'm pissed off.
Yeah. So now we're going to discuss some points that were made that up until this point really had been talked about by the family, but obviously they weren't being listened to or heard out. But this is what Anonymous went through. So I have about 9 things that we can talk about. Number 1, the students that discovered his body were actually the daughters of the superintendent in the school district. Number 2, it exposes video footage of the brothers that were determined not to be in the area at the time. Literally, one of them is in this area, walking back and forth multiple times at the time that Kendrick would have been killed, or I'm going to say killed. At the time that he was killed. And he changes his shirt, and at one point, someone froze this frame. I saw this on Reddit. And you can see blood on his right shoulder, on the left side on the screen.
And they were carrying trash bags.
Carrying trash bags back and forth.
Did I jump ahead of you?
No, you're good. And he's holding a paper towel in his right hand, which is where the blood drop was. So he changes his clothes completely. Number 3, it shows the hostility from the sheriff, Chris Prine, with the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department, and how he literally said, when the CNN reporter came in, he said, I'm not discussing that case with you. I'm not discussing that case. I don't want to talk about it. He said, I don't want to talk about it. It's closed. That's all I have to say about it. Like, and then kicks them out, literally for asking questions, which is what reporters do when you invite them in, by the way.
Right.
Next, it discusses the fact that his parents were denied access to his body for days after. Number 5, they exposed that the coroner was not called to the scene until 6 hours after law enforcement arrived. And that's including GBI and the sheriff's department. And this is literally illegal in Georgia, just so you guys know. Number 6, once the paramedics arrived on the scene, which wasn't until hours after, they came, and when they arrived, they noticed that the investigators were not wearing shoe booties, therefore contaminating the crime scene. They did not have up crime scene tape, and they did not shut the area down. And it seemed as if Kendrick's body had been removed from the building before they arrived, and this was confirmed by multiple students that had observed it. And number 7, paramedics told investigators that this was 100% a homicide and not an accidental death. Therefore, they wanted to make sure that this was being processed correctly, because that's also their job, to make sure that they say, like, no, this isn't right. And they were like, the police, GBI, were like, no, it's an accident, because they had already made up their mind about what the story was. They had the story before anybody even came to do the autopsy.
Yep.
Next, the students were threatened with their graduation if they spoke about this with authorities. African-American students were told that they are not allowed to be interviewed by the sheriff's department. Like,
and this is from the school?
No, from the school, and the sheriff's department said that they were not interviewing African-American students.
Oh my God.
And lastly, people in the community were literally getting arrested with false accusations when discussing this case in a public setting.
Oh my God.
So in November of 2018, a third autopsy was performed at the family's request, and it determined, once again, that this is not an accidental death, but blunt force trauma to the right side of his neck and thorax. And once this was officially released, an affidavit was released by the family from a witness that stated an individual admitted to them that Kendrick was killed after a person had hit him on the neck with a 45-pound dumbbell. Talking about the brothers. And I'm really nervous to say their names. I am going to call them the Bell brothers. You guys can literally Google this, but people have been getting sued for saying their full names. So that's all you can literally just look it up. And all of this was then handed over to the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department. And in August of 2017, Georgia Judge Richard Porter ruled that the Johnson family and their attorney had to pay more than $292,000 in legal fees to dozens of the respondents in their civil suit, accusing the family of fabricating evidence. If this was a white boy, we would not be even having this conversation right now. And this is the perfect example of how systemic racism and just racism in general literally still flows through the country that we live in. And it is disgusting. It is
sickening. It's
fucking enraging. Like, I literally, even just from an outside perspective, I couldn't imagine, like, I'm not even going to try to put words into anybody's mouth, because I literally can't even imagine it, how that must feel. On March 10th, 2021, Kendrick's case was reopened by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department with a new sheriff, Ashley Polk. However, he later stated that there seems to be no issues with his Sheriff's Department's first investigation, still ruling that this is, I'm quoting at this point, a quote, weird accident.
Okay.
in the last week, there's been a lot of updates about this case, specifically out of Valdosta, out of Atlanta. You guys can literally just Google Kendrick Johnson's name and you can read these. It's still just discussing the fact that this case is a cover-up and deserves to be reopened.
I'm glad it's still in the media.
I mean, if it wasn't, I don't know what we would do.
I hope it haunts every single official that worked the case, the school administration, the brothers, everybody.
The family, I hope. I mean, literally, the FBI should be terrified right now. Anonymous just came after you. I know that y'all think that means nothing. Like, y'all are like, oh, you're probably laughing at the fact that
millions of people listen to Anonymous.
And I'm, like, not even a huge conspiracy theorist. What I am is what you teach me and ask me about and the questions that you give me. But when Anonymous releases something, I know that shit is factual.
Because their asses can hijack anything.
Yeah, and
hack into anything.
They know what y'all are doing. They're probably in your phones right now. Sorry. So, Lowndes County, Valdosta.
What the fuck is going on?
What the fuck are y'all doing? And the state of Georgia, what are you doing? These judges, what are you fucking doing? This makes no sense. This family deserves justice. Kendrick deserves for his name to be said over and over again on airwaves. I mean, I want to scream it. I just, like, this case gives me chills. I didn't sleep last night.
Makes me sick.
It makes, and the fact that they even had to go so far out of their own, the family, out of their comfort zone to get attention was to release their son's photos from the crime scene.
Right.
Can you imagine
having to put that out there
and having to see it on every news channel in your area, to have people talking about it always? That's your baby. Mm-hmm. That is your child that people are seeing in a place that no one ever wants to see somebody. That's how hard they're fighting for their son. So we owe it to them to do the exact same. And listeners, if you're listening, this person literally released pictures of their baby to get more coverage on this. It needs to be talked about. There needs to be tweets going out every second of the day. The national, international news channels need to be discussing this case. Kendrick deserves justice.
Because that wasn't an accident.